make the sweater, I chose to use this yarn, which is Swish worsted weight yarn from WeCrochet, and it's in the colour Frosting. It's a category 4 weight yarn and it's absolutely beautiful to work with. And I'll add below all the details for the amount that you'll need for different sizes. You'll also need a pair of scissors, a needle for your ends, and then a 5mm crochet hook, or the hook that will meet the gauge for the pattern. So I've got my front panel here that I've already made to show you, and what we'll need to do is first learn this stitch repeat that comes at the bottom, and then it repeats through up at the top here, and then what we'll do then is add the sleeves either side, but we'll still use that same stitch repeat. So what we'll do is work a swatch of the stitch, and by working a swatch together you can then find out if you meet the gauge or not, and then you'll know everything you need to know, because whichever size you decide to make will be different to here. It will be different numbers, and you'll be able to find out in the pattern how many stitches yours will need to be across. So let's go for it and make a swatch of the stitch first. Okay, so to begin our swatch, or if you're ready to, you can begin your actual sweater. We are going to pop a slip knot on the hook, and then we're going to chain out 25. Now you'll see in the pattern that they are multiples of 6 plus 1 for your starting chains. And then for row 1, we're going to work back along these chains, and we're going to start in the second chain from the hook and work a yarn over slip stitch, which is literally exactly what it says on the tin if you've not met it before. So we yarn over and then we work a slip stitch. Now I'm going to work into the back bumps as you see here, because I think it gives a much nice neater edge at the bottom, but do whatever feels comfortable for you. And that's a yarn over slip stitch. So we yarn over and then we pull through everything to make a slip stitch. And we just do that for each chain that we come across. And there we are at the end. Oh, I spoke too soon. There we are. I spoke far too soon. And there we are at the end of row 1. And now we're going to turn our work. Okay, so to begin row 2, we're going to chain 1. And row 2 is the most complicated part of the pattern, but it is really doable. It has only got half double crochets and slip stitches in it. We just have to turn and back and forth, and I'll show you how to do that. So we are going to half double crochet in the back loop only of 5. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, 4 and 5. And now stick with me, because what we're going to do is we're going to turn, because we want to work back into those 5 stitches already. And now what we're going to do is we're going to skip this next stitch that's underneath us, and we're going to work into the 4 remaining until we get to the end. And we're going to work a half double crochet in the 3rd loop only. So that's this very front loop that comes to you here. So if you turn it on its end, you've still got a front loop and a back loop there, but we need this 3rd loop that we find here. So we've skipped that first one, remember, and we're going to work 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So the 3rd loop of that last one is sometimes tricky to find. Okay, and so remember we're still on row 2. I promise it will work out. And then what we need to do is we need to turn again. You can see we've got like a little bit of a zigzag going on here now. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to chain 1, and we're going to half double crochet in the back loop of those 4 stitches we've just made. So 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now that 4th one sometimes hides, so make sure you find it. And then what we need to do, because we're aiming to come down here to carry on working the rest of the row, what we now need to do is work a half double crochet in the side of the next stitch. So that's the stitch that we skipped when we turned about. So you'll see you've got your 4 here, and then actually that works quite well to portion it off, doesn't it? So we're going to aim for this stitch here. So the 5th stitch of the row, and we're going to pop a half double crochet into the side of that stitch. And then we're going to do a half double crochet into the back loop only of the next stitch. And that, let's just pop it down and have a look at it, is the very beginnings of row 2. And all we're going to do now is repeat that whole section all the way along in sets of 6 stitches. So the way we do that is we half double crochet in the back loop of 5, and then when we've done that, we're ready to turn. And then remember, we're going to skip the stitch that's directly underneath us, and we're going to work into the next 4. So 1, 2, 3 and 4, and we're going to put half double crochet into the 3rd loop of those 4. And now what we need to do is pop a slip stitch into the next stitch, so the 3rd loop of the next stitch, and then we're ready to turn. And now we can work a half double crochet in the back loop of 4, so we're not counting that slip stitch as a stitch. So sometimes it's good to turn on its end and then you'll work out where your 4 are. So we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4 there. So there's the back loop only. 1, 2, 3 and 4. And then we're ready to pop the half double crochet into the side of the next stitch here. And then we finish the set of 6 by going into the back loop of the next one and working a half double crochet. And we see there's our next little wave, or however we want to call it. Okay, so let's go again. We're going to work a half double crochet into the back loop of 5. We're going to turn. We're going to skip that first stitch, and then we're going to work into the next 4, into the 3rd loop of them. We're going to slip stitch into the 3rd loop of the next one, but that doesn't count as a stitch. And then we can turn, and we're going to half double crochet into the back loop of 4. And then we're ready to work a half double crochet into the side of the next stitch. And then a half double crochet into the back loop of the next. And that's our next repeat of it. And let's just finish off the row with a half double crochet in the back loop of 5. and we turn. We skip this first one, and then we're going to half double crochet in the third loop of 4, and then slip stitch in the third loop of the next, and then we're going to turn. We're going to half double crochet in the back loop of 4, and then we're going to work a half double crochet in the side of the next, and then a half double crochet in the back loop of the very last stitch. And that is row 2 complete. Now, I don't think I breathed through the whole of that, it didn't feel like, because it does take a lot of concentration to learn it to start with. But once you have it, you will be absolutely fine. And it's nothing that you can't do. It's just half double crochets and slip stitches and knowing when to turn and when not to turn. So that's row 2 complete. So row 3, we're just going to work in the third loops for this row. So just the very first loop that you come to of your stitches. And we're going to chain 1, and we're going to half double crochet in that first one there. And then we're going to yarn over slip stitch in the next 5. So that will complete your set of 6. You always need to think in sets of 6 for this sweater. And then 5. And then we half double crochet in the next, and then yarn over slip stitch in the next 5. So nice and straightforward for this row. And then a half double crochet in the next, and then a yarn over slip stitch in 5. Just repeat that all the way to the end. And there we are at the end of row 3. So if we turn it over, we can see that we have a lovely, lovely little wavy pattern going on. So then row 4 is beautifully easy. All we're going to do is chain 1, and then we're going to do a half double crochet in the back loop of each. And so that's the end of row 4. And now we're ready to turn and work row 5. Now row 5 is the last row we need to learn for the stitch repeat. So we just need to chain 1, and then we're going to just yarn over slip stitch in each stitch that we come across. And there we have it, that's row 5. And so this is what we now look like from the right side. And that's it, that's all you need to know to make this entire garment. And so what I'll do now, I'll grab my front that I've made and I will show you how we use that repeat throughout it. So here we are, and we have got at the bottom of the sweater, you'll see the pattern tells you to work rows 1 to 5, and then we're going to repeat rows 2 to 5, and then 2 to 5 again. And then we get to a section where we repeat rows 4 and 5, 4 and 5, 4 and 5. up until, because that's the point where if you wanted to make yours longer, you can extend and work as many repeats of this section that you would like. And then we go back to repeating rows 2 to 5. And then when we split for the sleeves, we do the same again, but it's a slightly different repeat. We're going to add a row of 4 and 5 in between here on the sleeves. So it's really straightforward once you know the stitch pattern, which you now do. So if you want to go ahead and work the bottom section, the main body section for your size, and then come back and I will show you how we extend and add the sleeves on to either side and carry on working in these long rows. Right then, we're now at the point where we're ready to add our sleeves. I'm going to add our sleeves on the end, the two ends of our body panel that we have here already. And in order to do that, what we're going to need to do is add a chain onto the end of this part here. So we have our working yarn here that's attached to our ball there, and we're going to need to come back to that. But what we need to do so that we can work the sleeves in one big long row into the body is add some chains here. So let's do that now. Okay, so grab yourself a new ball of yarn. So we've got 2 on the go at the moment. And what we're going to do is turn to the wrong side facing. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach to the last stitch there. This is our new ball of yarn. And we're going to chain 48 for the size that I'm making. Do check in the pattern because yours might be slightly different. But work a chain of 48, and then we're going to need to break this yarn. So once you've done your 48 chains, we are going to break the yarn there and release your hook, and then come back to that ball. That can be your next ball of yarn, and then we're going to flip back to where we were, and we're going to pop this working yarn on our hook again. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set the length of the other sleeve, and we're going to do that by chaining 49, or again, however many it tells you in the pattern for your size. So there we have 49, and we're now going to turn. And now beginning in the second chain from the hook, we're going to work all the way along this chain for our sleeve, and I'm going to work away all the way along our body, and then all the way along this second chain here. We're going to do a stitch in every stitch, and it's going to be a yarn over slip stitch. So I'm going to work into the back bumps because I just think it looks much nicer and neater, and we're just going to work a yarn over slip stitch in each of them. I don't know if you've ever made a garment in this construction before, but it feels really weird at this point, and it feels like it won't work, but I promise it will. And now you see we're in the main body, and we're still doing our yarn over slip stitches. And now we've arrived at the chain that we added for the other sleeve, and so we're going to work a yarn over slip stitch into each of those. And this will feel all sorts of fiddly now that you've worked into nice, easy finding stitches. So just take your time, work into the back bumps if you possibly can, because it will give you a nicer underarm seam. But if you don't want to do that, don't worry, because it will be hidden underneath the arm. So don't do it if you don't feel that you want to. Okay, so when you have finished what will feel like the longest row in the world, I will not kid you, we are ready to turn, as I have done there, and work row 2 of the sleeves and main body section. And you already know how to do this because we are just going to carry on and do what we did here at the bottom, but with a very slight difference. So let me get the other panel that I have already made to show you. So you see we have where we've joined here for the sleeves, and we've got our yarn over slip stitch row that we have just done, and then we're just going to repeat. We're going to do rows 2 and then 3 is this one that runs along here, row 4 is the half double crochets, and then the yarn over slip stitch is row 5. So that's the repeat that we use down at the bottom of the sweater. And then what we're going to do is just add a repeat of rows 4 and 5 before we then start again row 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, and then rows 2 and rows 3 and rows 4 will finish. But you might find, because this is what's going to set the depth of your armhole, and so you'll find in the pattern that you will need to do it a different amount of times for the size that you're making. So the other great thing about this section is that if you want your armholes deeper or narrower than they are in the pattern for your size, then that's fine. Just work up until the point that you're happy that they fit nicely for how you want them around your arms. And then you can always like pin them once you've done the 2 panels, leave your first panel sort of hanging as it were, and then make the other panel and match it up, and you can almost even stitch marker it together just to see how it fits, because it's so important to get the fit right for you. So follow the pattern and work as many repeats of that 2 to 5 and then 4 and 5, 2 to 5, 4 and 5. And then I'll see you back here and we will seam everything together. So to join the sweater together, it's kind of fairly free and easy, if for want of a better way of saying it, because the great thing about this, you'll see I've put some stitch markers in here already. That's the top and the sleeve here and the neckline. You can make your neckline and opening wherever you like. If you want it to be flopping off your shoulders, then make it wider. If you want it to be fairly snug to your neck, then pull it in. The main thing is you just need to have an equal number of stitches either side. But before you do that, if you're making it, especially if you're making it for yourself, I should say, what I would recommend is doing the side seams first, because then you can pop it on and put stitch markers and you'll feel exactly where it will sit. Whereas if you don't join the sides, you won't feel how it feels around your body. So the first thing we'll do is have a little guesstimate and put some stitch markers in, but then we'll do the side seams first and then we'll try it on and then we'll do the top side. So to join our underarm and side seams, we're going to do it all in one go. And you can see I've got the wrong side facing me now, and you'll need the wrong side on this side here. So basically you'll need the right sides on the inside. There we are, that's the easiest way to do it. I get so confused with rights and wrongs sometimes. And I'm going to suggest that we join it with a crochet seam with a slip stitch. But you join it however you like. Some people I know really like to whip stitch their seams. They like to single crochet their seams. Whatever feels right for you. Now, I like a slip stitch seam. For me, it's faster. And it sits really nicely and flat on the inside of garments. So I very much like this. But as I say, join it however you would like. So I've got the end of my sleeve here. The two of them are matched up. And what we're going to do is we're going to pop the hook into whichever loop you like, really, of the stitches, but just be consistent is the main thing. You can go through the whole stitch, you can go through the back loop, you can do the front loops, whatever you like, but just be consistent and match them up as you go along. Now the underside of the sleeves is really easy to do because we've got actual stitches to work into. So I begin with a chain one for mine. That's just the way I always do it to anchor it down. And then you literally just match stitch for stitch and you slip stitch them all the way along up until you get to your underarm. So the main thing to know is if you do choose to do a slip stitch seam like I am, then don't be too tight. Don't have a tight tension because that will pull your line in and it will pucker your seam. So just nice and relaxed, give them space to breathe and kind of match the tension that you've got here in your actual garment. And now here we are at the underarm section, and you'll see I haven't weaved in my ends yet. I never weave in my ends like literally right until the last minute because I've done things before where I've then had to undo the whole thing and it's all gone drastically wrong. So it does make the stitches a little harder to see. So just give your end a tug just to make sure that you've joined them all. And then we're ready to rotate and work now down the side. And now, of course, down this side, we don't have nice, easy looking stitches to go into. We've actually got the sides of rows. So I would just do a slip stitch in both layers of your fabric, your front and your back, in the side of each row as you go down. Now, a good way to keep track of this, if you're finding it hard to see where the stitches are, is to put some stitch markers in at various points along this. But if you know me at all, have been following me for any length of time, you'll know that I'm pretty much allergic to stitch markers. And it's so silly, I should use them more, but I almost like the challenge of kind of like having to see if I can work it out myself. But anyway, if you're not not as stubborn as me and like making life easy for yourself, use some stitch markers. And so there we are at the very end. And I've already broken my yarn, so pull it through, and that is your side seam complete. So do the same on the other side, and then we'll be ready to join the tops of the sleeves. So here we have the top of one of the sleeves, and we've got both thicknesses of the fabric, and we've got the wrong side here and the wrong side there. And I've popped a stitch marker in just about where I think it might be good for me, but have a play and see, because you can kind of try it on now with stitch markers in place. Pop one at the end and one here. And oh, if you wanted to make it a cold shoulder top, then you could leave some of it open, couldn't you? I've only just thought of that. But what we're going to do then is in exactly the same way, we're going to slip stitch to join this. Now I really like the ridge detail here that we've got from these extra loops, so I'm going to suggest joining to this front loop here, and then all the way across here we're going to join to this loop here, right, the last loop that you find, because that will then push the loops towards the front. When you do, I'm not explaining it very well. When you do it like this, it will push the stitches to the front, and then you get a nice ridge at the front. If you don't like that look though, then don't. Just go through the whole of the stitch and it will join it for you instead. So we are going to slip stitch just for as many stitches as you would like to be joined on your sleeve. And then once you've done that, don't, fasten off, but with a tail that's long enough to make changes with. So if you wanted to slip stitch a few more, then you can, but don't weave it in until you're absolutely sure, because then you can pull back some stitches if you want to. You can pretty much do whatever you like. Okay, so I've got to where I think I'm going to have it, but I'm going to break my yarn, but I'm going to give myself a good amount at the end there, so that if I want to change my mind, I can. And so I'll just pull that through and then make a note, or remember how many stitches you joined here, because then you need to turn it, and we're going to join exactly the same amount of stitches on this side, the other sleeve, and then try it on and see how you like it, and then just adjust accordingly. And then when you've done that and you're happy with how it all sits, you can then just weave in all of your ends, and then I would give it another little block then after that, and you're done. Okay, so I know I said we were done, but I just wanted to add a little extra snippet on here to show you how I added some cuffs and a bottom band to my sweater, because I really love it with the open and wide sleeves, but I know that doesn't suit everyone. So what I've done is added some really lovely little cuffs onto the end, and the great thing about these is you can make them as long or as short as you like. You can make them longer still, and because of the style of it, you can turn it back and you've got exactly the same ribbing on the other side. And this is using the yarn over slip stitch that we've done throughout the whole of the sweater. So you already know how to do this, but I thought I'd give you a whistle stop tour of how to gather in and taper in at the cuffs here, and then add your cuff. So the first thing we need to do is get our sleeve end. So the whole of the sweater is seamed together now, and we're doing this with it all in place, and I have also already blocked this. So I would definitely add them once you have blocked your cuffs, because cuffs by themselves, they don't need blocking. Unless they're terribly wibbly wobbly, you don't need to block this, because the nature of them is that they're going to be smaller, they're going to have negative ease on your arm, so they will squash onto your arm and stretch, a bit like a turtleneck jumper does. It will stretch over. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the underarm, and we're going to find the side of the row on the underarm here. So that's where it joins, and you're going to join your yarn here, And all we're going to be doing is working single crochets evenly around the edge of the cuff, so all the way around this sleeve end here. Now, the amount you do is entirely up to you. I've said in the pattern the numbers that I suggest for each size, and for this size I have suggested to do 62 around here. So you'll find that you have to figure out where to consistently put them in order to get them even. But if you just go for it and see how they fit and see, you want it to basically lay as flat as it is now for this. We're not gathering at all at this point. And the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go work in continuous rounds now here, and we're going to do single crochet 2 together for each set of 2 stitches that we have. So we're going to single crochet 2 together, and then the same again. So we start a single crochet but don't complete, and we start one in the next and then complete the 2 together. And you work that all the way around until you get back to the start. So then once you've completed all of those single crochet 2 togethers and got back to the beginning again, we are ready to slip stitch in the first stitch, and then we can work our cuff. So the way we're going to do this is a join as you go method. And so to begin with, we're going to chain 26, or that's what I've suggested in the pattern at least. You can work your cuff as long or as short as you like. So maybe try the sweater on, because you can now, and then work out how long you'd like your cuff to be. And then once you've done your chain, however long you want it to be, what we're going to then do is work back along that chain and join to the cuff. So we're going to use our yarn over slip stitch that we know already, and we're going to work in the second chain from the hook, and I do like to work in those back bumps, and you're going to work a yarn over slip stitch, which is really tricky, into a chain. So just give yourself some time and work one in each of them until you get back to the cuff. And then here we are in the last stitch. Pop our yarn over slip stitch there, and then we see we're back here, and if you give a tug you'll see which stitch you worked in last. I always find that's the best way to figure out where you are, because the next thing we need to do is work a slip stitch in the next 2 stitches around the edge here that we did. So that's joined to there, and then what we're going to do is flip and work in rows now back along these stitches that we have here, and you're going to work a yarn over slip stitch in the back loop only. So you're going to ignore these 2 slip stitches that you just joined with, and you're going to work the length of your cuff as a slip stitch, yarn over slip stitch, sorry, in the back loop only. And there we are at the end of that row. And now what we need to do is turn, and without getting yourself in a twist, I'm doing it like this because I want to keep it all on the camera for you, but normally I would flip the whole thing. There we go, we've turned. And now all we're going to do is chain 1 and then yarn over slip stitch in the back loop of each. So each row is exactly the same, yarn over slip stitch. The only difference is how you start your row. So if you're starting here at this end, we do a chain 1 to begin with. And if you're starting the other end, you're going to be slip stitching into 2 of the round that we did around the sleeve end, and then you'll just turn and work a yarn over slip stitch into the back loop only. It's a very wordy way of saying just keep going, as we have done for the last couple of rows. So if you want to go ahead and work your cuff, and then we'll meet you back here and I will show you how we join it together. Okay, so here we are. I've worked all the way around, and depending on how many stitches you chose to put around your sleeve end, you may end up finishing here or you may end up finishing here. Either way, it doesn't matter, because all we're going to do is join with a slip stitch seam to the first row that we did. That's all we need to do. Line up your stitches, and now just make a choice as to where you think the slip stitches work best. I think they perhaps work best go through the whole of this stitch and then just that first loop of the one across there. But have a play around and see what works best for you. Bear in mind though, this will be underneath your arm, so it will be hidden slightly, so don't worry too much if it doesn't completely match. But have a play about and see what works best for you. So yeah, just slip stitch all the way down to the cuff and then you can weave in your end. And then once you've done that, pop back here and I'll show you what I've done at the bottom of the sweater to add a little band there too. Okay, so for the bottom cuff, you can probably see here that I have got the bottom edge of my seamed sweater. And here we don't have to do any setup because we've already got stitches to work into here. Now, what I'm going to suggest is that we do a yarn over slip stitch cuff, but if you really want, and that will pull it in slightly, but if you really want it to really cinch into your waist, what I would suggest is replacing one of the rows with a slip stitch in the back loop only, and that will make it sort of tighter and it will then pull into your waist. But if you don't want that shaping, then leave that out and just do the yarn over slip stitches that I'm going to do. So just join to the first stitch that you come after the seam, and I'm going to chain 16, but you can do as many as you like. That will make 15 stitches for mine. And just as we did for the sleeve cuff, we're going to work in exactly the same way, a yarn over slip stitch into that back bump of the second from the hook and each along. And then you've probably guessed how we do the next bit. We're going to slip stitch into the next two around the bottom, the base of the sweater, and then turn and work in rows exactly the same way as we did for the cuff. And now, again, you can really customize your sweater here because you can either work one panel of these for the back of the sweater and one panel for the front and have the cuff open at the sides, which I think looks really nice, or you can join it the same way as we did for the cuff for the sleeve with a slip stitch, and then it will pull it in tighter. It's entirely up to you how you feel it will look best on you and how you would like to style your sweater. So go have some fun. You could even make the back, if you're going to split the cuff here, you could make the back longer than the front. I think that's a really nice look too. And here we are back at those stitches we need to go to slip stitch into the next two. And I've just put them straight into the center of the stitches there. And then you turn and you work the next row exactly as we did the sleeve cuffs.